I found this one supplement that decreased my heavy metals by 75% and decreased my homocysteine by 40%. This supplement is MSM, one of my favorite game changer supplements out there. Welcome to the Joe Cohen Show. Join me as I share my experience with biohacking and invite top health experts to explore the latest technology, supplements, research, and resources for optimizing your body and brain. So I started to listen to more podcasts, and the thing that all these podcasts were telling me to do was exercise more. Mainly Peter Attia and Drew Huberman. They're very big into exercise, and it made sense, right? More exercise seemed to be better, right? I wanted to improve my VO2 max. I wanted to become stronger, bigger, faster, stronger, whatever. So it made sense that the two biggest factors for mortality, the biggest predictors, are VO2 max and grip strength, or just strength in general. So if I wanted to basically live as long or as healthy as possible, I really needed to exercise more. I was exercising a reasonable amount, but I wasn't doing everything. I didn't work on my flexibility, my mobility, my strength training enough, just really my aerobic capacity. Basically, I was trying to improve everything. And in order to do that, I had to start exercising more. Another important factor is I never really exercised in my whole life. So I did light exercise, such as walking, maybe push ups here and there, right? The occasional exercise snack. But mainly, my main exercise was walking and volleyball on the weekends, I would say, for quite some time. And so I never did anything that was rough on the joints, which also means that I never really worked on my joints and tendons, which take a long time to build up. So about 2 years ago, I started to exercise more significantly, and I was doing weight training, and then over time, I started to do more and more exercise. So I said, "Okay, I need to work on my VO2 max more." I started jogging more. "Okay, I need to work on my flexibility." I started doing more yoga. Before I knew it, I was really just doing a lot of exercise, and then what happened was is I started to just feel like I was getting injured one by one. So there was one joint at a time, just seemed like it was getting injured. Then I laid off the exercise for a few months. Some things were going away. So I didn't really give it too much. When I started to get into acro yoga, I kicked it up a notch. So I was doing acro yoga. I was trying to do strength training. I was jogging. I was doing aerobics. I was doing everything. Really working out 3 hours a day, whatever, exercising 3 hours a day. And I thought, okay, this is what I need to do for maximum longevity. Now, what happened was is I started getting injured one at a time. My wrists, my shoulder, my I started to get what's called golfer's elbow on both arms, tennis elbow, so it's both of the sides, and basically just the injuries started to compound. I started to get my wrists. Before I knew it, all of my tendons, I got plantar fasciitis, right? And this happened in a very short period where I was getting all these issues just came up all out of nowhere. And so it all happened in the short period where I just started getting injured all over the place. And I wasn't sure what was happening. So I went to the India retreat that I do to see, okay, what's happening in my blood that can help me determine what I need to do. And also I started looking at my genetics and a whole bunch of other things. And one of the things that came up after I uploaded a bunch of lab tests was MSM. And I started to look into MSM more, and it started to make sense. So this one, I would say I more likely figured out from my lab test than my genetics, but the only way I was able to figure out from my lab test was because of the self-decode software, where it showed me all of the markers that were suboptimal. So I'm going to go through some of these markers that were suboptimal, and I'll explain how this interacts. So the interesting thing is the last test that I took, they were all suboptimal. Interesting. So there's 8 markers that were suboptimal that were related to MSM. And now it shows all of them are optimal. So it shows if it was suboptimal in the past and they're optimal now. And when I did the last test, the test before the previous one, they were all suboptimal. And then they all became optimal after MSM. And the reason I connected it was because mechanistically it makes sense, but also that was one of the major changes that I was doing. And so it all fit into the pattern. Now, these markers are related to methylation, so homocysteine, which there is a clinical trial showing that MSM, there's two clinical trials showing MSM can lower homocysteine. And so that makes sense. So my homocysteine got lowered by about 15-20%, which makes sense. My DHEA sulfate, which makes sense. DHEA sulfate. So my DHEA levels itself without the sulfate were always pretty good, but the sulfate levels started to go down. And sulfate, if you're low on DHEA sulfate, it makes sense that you don't have enough sulfur. So DHEA sulfate went up by, I would say, 2.5x. And my ALT, lactate dehydrogenase, these are markers for recovery. So it was saying that I wasn't recovering as well. These also normalized. My HSCRP, so I was having some inflammation from these injuries that weren't fully healing. And I'm not talking about even above 1. The HSCRP was 0.7 around. Most people would consider that optimal, but it still wasn't that optimal in the sense that it then went down to 0.25 after the MSM. So after my recovery improved a lot, actually the inflammation levels where you were able to see that in the high sensitivity CRP. Now there were also my cystatin C seemed to improve, which is a marker of kidney function. But there was two markers that were also very significant in my amino acid panel, which is the methionine and cysteine. So these are sulfur related amino acids, and both of them were relatively low in my lab tests. And there wasn't clear research showing that if you take MSM, these are going to go up. It's just theoretical. If you take more sulfur, you should have more sulfur amino acids in your blood. That's something that seemed to be plausible. But so I took these amino acid tests about 3 or 4 times, and I was low every time. And so then I said, okay, after MSM, I took them, and actually the methionine went up 3x, and I took these tests 3 times. So very consistently became elevated. And the cysteine went up 9x, also consistently elevated, not in a bad way, but it showed that my sulfur levels really shot up. So these 8 markers were out of the optimal range. And through this one supplement, I was able to improve my recovery significantly. So, number one is it improved my lab markers, but also it improved my actual recovery. So, all of my pains basically started to go away. The plantar fasciitis, gone. The wrist pain, gone. The shoulder pain, gone. Oh, I also injured my neck in various times. And again, I think it was just not enough collagen or something related to MSM, because then all the neck injuries went away. Meaning I didn't have a prolonged neck injury, but just seemed more susceptible to it. And that wasn't the case after MSM. What other injuries? Oh, the tennis and the golfer's elbow went away. There's the golfer's elbow on this side is like 95% away. And I think the reason it just didn't go away 100% is just because it takes months to go away. But I don't have any issues with it. I'll feel it if I'm doing very heavy bench pressing, or if I'm really using that muscle in acro yoga a lot. I'll feel it a little bit, but I just continue anyway, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. But it is something that I'm still taking care of, in the sense of if I'll put ultrasound on it, and then it just goes away completely. So that's something it's something that I'm still working on a little bit, but I would say that doesn't cause any issues in my life. And the MSM, what I think happened with the MSM is it really helped the recovery, number one, but it also stopped any further damage. Meaning it seems like that one place, I was putting more and more damage on that specifically, versus all the other stuff was much more new. I also think that got injured from bad form in certain exercises, but all the other injuries just went away completely as if I've never had it. And this one went away 95%. No issues. There's no weight limitations or anything like that. I just use it as needed, but it's something I still take care of. There's a certain marker called the DHEA sulfate to cortisol ratio. And this marker is a marker of recovery, essentially. So if your cortisol is high, That means that you didn't fully recover. If your DHEA sulfate is low, that means that you didn't fully recover. So you want to look at that ratio. My my DHEA sulfate went up higher, my cortisol went up lower. So that ratio improved quite a lot. So when I look at all these markers of recovery, the lactate dehydrogenase, the DHEA sulfate to cortisol ratio, various amino acids, they all, and the ALT and AST, they all improved quite significantly. And that meant that I was recovering much better. Now, one thing that was unexpected from my labs was the heavy metals went down quite significantly, right? And so my lead went down by 40%, mercury by 75%, and arsenic went down quite significantly too, by 80%. So it was something that was just not expected at all. I was like, why is this happening exactly? Turns out that sulfur helps detox these heavy metals. There's no clinical trials on it, but it is something that was quite significant. Meaning, my heavy metals were actually never very elevated. In 2019, my lead was very elevated. But besides that situation, I would say that they were in the optimal range. However, the thing with heavy metals is the optimal range is 0. What that means is it's better you don't have any heavy metals in your body. Now, nobody has 0 because it's in our food, it's in our air, it's in everything. So there's no way to get it down to 0. So you just want to get it as low as possible. And mine were actually pretty low. So it wasn't even a goal of mine. Oh, I want to get, lower on these heavy metals, but it actually just went even a lot lower. And it was like the lowest level of heavy metals that I've seen in anybody that I've looked at their lab test overall. And so I think the MSM helped lower the heavy metals as well. Again, I can't say for sure it was only from MSM, but I think so because this was the major change that I made. I made some minor changes here and there, like adjusting a dose for this, that, or the other. But the major change that I made was the MSM, and it makes sense mechanistically. How much MSM do I take? So before the last blood test, I was taking 7 grams of MSM a day. Now I take 6 grams a day. I went a little lower just for the fact that I was including more sulfur from other sources. So, for example, I started to take a little more NaC, a little more taurine, and these are also sources of sulfur. And therefore, I felt like I didn't need as much MSM. However, if I compare MSM with taurine and NaC, MSM had a bigger impact than those two. So I've taken taurine and NaC. It didn't seem to change the recovery as much as MSM. I think MSM, number one, has a lot more sulfur, or it's just more bioavailable, or it's just used in a certain way. It's more general purpose, I think, that could be used in various ways. But the MSM also has a methyl group. MSM stands for Methyl Sulfonyl Methane. So it has that methyl group and it has a sulfur group. And therefore, because I'm a low methylator, also I have a genetic predisposition for low detox. So genetic predisposition for low methylation, for low detox. Therefore, the sulfur helps with the detox and the methyl groups help with the homocysteine. One of the side effects I actually got from taking 7 grams a day was acne. So what I think happened is it was basically detoxing. I don't like that word because it's used in a lot of scammy ways, but I really do think it was actually doing some kind of detox because I don't generally get acne. And it only happened for a week when I started on it. I think what happened is after some time, basically, meaning after a week, my body already did the detoxing that it needed from being deficient in these sulfur groups. And so right now I'm taking 6 grams a day. I take about 2 grams a day of taurine and 1,200 milligrams of NaC. Altogether, that's quite a lot of sulfur groups. NaC and taurine also bring down homocysteine, so I wanted to diversify what I'm getting from different sources. If I take too much MSM, I start to get a little jittery, right? It gives me this feeling that, okay, I really want to exercise right now. So before MSM, I would say if I exercised, you stop when you're done with the exercise. I just felt like, drained. I don't want to work right now. I just want to relax and do nothing. Whereas with the MSM, I felt much more energized after. So after I worked out or after I exercised, I didn't feel like, okay, I lost my motivation. So it seemed like there's something about sulfur or MSM that prevented the loss of motivation after exercise and also increases the motivation to exercise. It seems like it does things in the body that makes you want to move, right? It's you don't want to be still or you I get jittery or a little anxiety from it, but it seems like if I do nothing, if I take a lot of MSM and don't exercise, that's also not a good thing. Another side effect that I got was I did get a little gas that smelled a little bit like sulfur for a few days, but that basically went away. So after a week or two, there was absolutely no side effects, and I still got the benefits of MSM. There's no specific brand that you need to take. MSM is pretty standard supplement. You could take any brand of it, and it depends on you, for example. Do you like swallowing bigger, smaller pills? But I just go for the one from a decent company, right? I just so for me, Doctor's Best has a 1,500 milligram pill, decent company, big pill. So then I could take 4 of those instead of if I take something that has 500 milligrams, I'll need to take 12 of those, right? And so it's just a matter of how much is in a pill. And I'm also trying to take the powders to see if I could fit that in any way. So in I'm trying to see if it's not gonna make my any of my shakes taste disgusting. So I'm gonna start with my green shake and, yeah, I'm just gonna experiment with that and see because taking 4 pills of 1,500 milligrams, not ideal. I'd rather take some of it in the powder form. So I take it in the morning because I find that it increases my energy, it increases my desire to move around, whereas if I take it at night, it seems to disturb my sleep or makes me wanna go to sleep later, so it has some kind of wakeful properties, and that's why I take it in the morning. It also has a long half-life, so it's, I think, 12 hours, and so the sulfur stays around in your body for quite some time, and you don't wanna take it at night. If I basically what I do is I'll take it in the morning and afternoon, so 3 grams twice a day, morning and afternoon, and then when I exercise, I use up a lot of those sulfur groups, and then I could go to sleep better at night. Rather than if I exercise and then take it at night, it's just yeah, I find that taking it in the morning and afternoon work better for me. The foods that are naturally high in sulfur are meats essentially, so animal foods, basically anything high in methionine and so these are gonna be things like eggs, chicken, beef, fish. Fish is also gonna have some taurine, so anything with taurine, cysteine, or methionine is going to be rich in sulfur. So these are all animal foods essentially. Now, I think historically people got sulfur from these hot baths essentially. So there's a whole bunch of it's a known therapy, these hot baths that increase sulfur. Another thing is Epsom salt baths is a way to get sulfur. So that's magnesium sulfate. That is also an approach. A lot of people do that. But historically, I think that a lot of people got sulfur from these hot springs. These hot springs, sometimes they smell like rotten eggs. That's the sulfur. And there's like a lot of folklore around the amazing health benefits of these hot springs. And I don't go to hot springs, so I don't get that sulfur. And I think that's one element of not getting enough sulfur. So then there's cruciferous vegetables and the allium family. These are things like broccoli, garlic, onions. They have that kind of sulfur tinge to it, if you will. And these are also a source of sulfur. Now, I don't think you could get enough sulfur from them because you're just going to get bloated if you eat too much broccoli, garlic, and onions, but they are a source of sulfur. So if you're eating a high meat diet, if you're eating fish, if you're also eating a lot of garlic and onions and broccoli, and you're also going to hot springs that have sulfur, they could be good sources of sulfur. And if you have a genetic predisposition that you can have enough sulfur, then you probably don't need MSM. So MSM is really a supplement that you could check a whole bunch of blood markers and see, do you need MSM? What is your homocysteine like? What is your ALT like? What is your DHEA sulfate like? What is your methionine and cysteine and taurine like, right? So if any of these sulfur amino acids are low, that is an indicator that you might need more sulfur. I also think one of the reasons that I became deficient in sulfur is because I take a lot of supplements. So every time you take a supplement, you basically use up sulfur, right? Most supplements are sulfated. So that means that the body is using sulfur for every time you take a supplement. The more you exercise, the more sulfur you need. So I think it was the combination of one, the toxin burden. So most toxins, many toxins at least, are sulfated, and probably I have a high toxic burden just by living in the modern toxic world. So the combination of having a high toxic burden, of exercising a lot, taking a lot of supplements, and also genetic predisposition for having low sulfur. It's something that I find my whole family has low sulfur, right? They have problems with exercising too much. And I think that has to do with sulfur because as soon as I added the MSM, it took away those problems. So, yeah, the ability to detox, all these things combine your toxin load, they all can impact your level of sulfur. And also, I went through a period where I stopped broccoli and onions and garlic. And so that also probably contributed to a decrease in my sulfur content. The conclusion is as follows. If this was above your head in any way, I would recommend you just upload your labs to self decode, type in MSM, and see what number it comes up for you in your recommendations. Right? Put in your symptoms and conditions, and it's going to give you a number that it comes up. So my number actually used to be a lot higher, but because all of my labs are optimal now that are related to MSM, it does come down. Does come back as lower. But you could look at things like, do you have a predisposition for higher homocysteine like I do? You have a predisposition for lower methylation, for detox. And all of these things are going to be relevant to sulfur. So actually, the interesting thing is that if I look at my predispositions, it actually matches the lab markers. And it says, for example, I have a predisposition for higher homocysteine, which is true. Lower methylation, true. Lower detox, true. So this only really comes about if I exercise any amount, like any decent amount. DHEA sulfate and methionine. These are all kind of risks. And if you look at the big picture of these DNA risks, what do I think is picking up on is not having enough sulfur in the body. And therefore, these biochemical pathways are related to that. Now, I do also have a higher risk for hair graying, interesting enough. And I think the including more sulfur in my diet is probably going to prevent hair graying. Now, I don't have a lot of gray hairs, very few actually, but that's because I do a whole bunch of other things that have been very helpful. But I could see that MSM would be useful for all these things. And also, it's very good for skin health. So, just to tell you certain things that MSM is good for that I care about, it for any kind of injury, so especially tendon injury, joint injury. There's more studies on joint injuries, but I find that it also for tendon injuries works quite well. Smooth skin, I think my skin improved since I was taking it. Immunity definitely improved since I was taking it. So that was, I would say, a very big impact. And then exercise recovery as well. 67% of listeners aren't subscribed to the show, so please don't forget to show your support by hitting the subscribe button now. You'll not only be supporting the show, but also investing in yourself and your health journey, all while helping to keep us ad-free.